Hi, I'm doing a follow-up on the Rachel Dolezal rabbit hole that has, some interesting things to consider as I've looked into it more. Um, what I Since I found the whole initial revelation so surprising, and since it really looks to me as though the attacks made upon her were coordinated, um, due to the timing of them. I mean, the complaint that was made against her to have her removed from office was made in April, and suddenly out of the blue, in early June, all of a sudden, you turn on the national TV and they're talking about how a white woman in very powerful positions, supposedly, has disguised herself as being black. And then one thing after the other seemed to unfold, that included allegations that, as I've looked into them, they've seemed to have turned into nothing when you actually look at the details. But at the time, uh, reports on what was going on were framed in such a way as to never really make it clear that the public wasn't getting the story straight about what was going on with her. For background, I've done a video already on the details of the supposed hate mail that she received. I am much more convinced than not that the hate mail was genuine. Um, it's down to this, basically. When you look at the details, it simply can only be either that she knew someone in Oakland and had those send those for her, which seems outrageous, or that in fact someone had crossed her path when she went down to the to training down in Oakland for 2 days with Councilmember Dominguez or Commissioner Dominguez, and shortly upon her return, a letter was sent to her that coincidentally didn't have a cancellation, which would have failed in Oakland, and a printout of a barcode. Okay. I know that I've received mail that hasn't been canceled before in my lifetime. It's a very rare occasion. What I wrestled with in those two videos was to try to deal with the fact that the mail had coincidentally come out of Oakland, and she has said that she has a friend who at least used to be employed in Oakland as a policeman. And you put the two coincidences together. If you just only had one, I mean, because there are a lot of people in Oakland, and there are letters that arrive without cancellations on them, despite what the post service says. Now, when they gave their testimony to the police officers, and not to belabor this too much, they told the truth from their point of view, and this is very important to understand. Um, no, no postal worker is ever going to deliver a letter to anybody in which he believes that the stamp is not canceled and the barcode hasn't been printed upon the parcel. Okay. However, at least as I know, it's happened in my lifetime. It's a very small handful. We're talking maybe 10 in my entire life of getting letters. And we'll say I've gotten a lot of letters for the last 20 years. Okay, just to be fair. Um, the postal, what you need to understand is the only letters that are going to come out of any postal service, the postal service control and be delivered, for the most part, are the letters, the only way it's going to come out not being canceled is if it goes unnoticed. We know it's not impossible for a letter to go unnoticed. I mean, a post office has a certain amount of employees and a lot of mail to deliver. I don't know the volume of that post office. I don't know how many letters a postal worker handles a day. I don't know what that equates to in picking up, examining, and setting the letter down per second. But, if there is a letter that doesn't have, a cancellation from where it was sent, or the barcode, which I don't know where that happens, you have to look at the letter long enough to notice it. Okay? I think for the most part, given the track record of 99.9999999 how many digits percent of letters I've received in my lifetime that have had the cancellation, have had the barcode on it, the post office does a pretty good job, and as far as they know, they're not aware of any letters leaving the post office without the cancellation. The fact that she said that she had some of her materials in it was also puzzling until I had to figure out by reading the report what those materials actually were. The report of the contents of the first letter, and I'd come to the conclusion that the only contents they could have the only materials that could have been were actually materials that weren't unique to Rachel Dolezal, but actually existed and were very likely to be used in hate mail sent to someone who works for the NAACP and or is African American. And I'll go so far as to say that, I'm not going to do research on cataloging and documenting the fact that there's only X number of lynching pictures out there. I really don't like to see that kind of human suffering. But I gathered there was a very unique collection that she passed out copies of as a part of her materials. And that unique collection was obviously picked by whoever this was that had caught her eye up there in Oakland. Okay. Pretty much, I can't say with absolute certainty, but I think there's at least a very good reason to think, or to be, to be, convinced that she didn't send those letters to herself. And the one very important fact, related to that is that a second set of letters were sent a whole month after she was back from Oakland. Okay. The first set of letters, we don't know when it was sent. We don't have a cancellation, but it was, she received the letter not too long after she had gotten back from her trip from Oakland. The meetings she was attending in some circles may be controversial. There may be people who don't like those kinds of meetings that are taking place. They know that representatives from ombudsman commission or commissions from around the country are going to show up, and she probably got someone's attention, and someone decided that they were going to basically be an asshole and send her that stuff. Okay, so in fact, when the second set of letters came in, that pretty much disproved the solid conclusions that were brought forth by, the post office that the police relied upon. I'm not saying the post office lied. What I am saying is that just as a matter of the way the post office works, as far as they know, as far as every single worker knows, down to every worker that's there, they all know that they have never knowingly passed out a letter without a cancellation on it and without the barcode on it. But that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. So it doesn't make them liars. It doesn't make the police liars. It doesn't make it a conspiracy. It doesn't mean that someone was working on the inside of the post office. It doesn't mean that anybody's working at the inside of the police in the police. And in turn, it doesn't mean that Dolezal sent it to herself. I thought the more eyebrow-raising comment that was made was that my materials were in the letter. But then again, it was not, as far as I could tell, at least from reading the police report. I'm relying on the accuracy of the police report. But the guy went through, he described the contents of all the pages on the first set of hate mail that was sent to her. And it looked like there was only one page that was not created by the author, or was not something that was just printed off a web page and placed into the envelope. It looks like there was one page you really couldn't say, well, that was printed off a web page. And therefore, I can only conclude that her materials were this one of, 12, I don't know how many pages it was, between 12 and 20 pages of just unpleasant topics, for the most part. This one page, the only page remaining, must have been what she was passing out, even though she doesn't even say it. So I'm deriving that conclusion. So, if any of those things fall through, then arguments can be made against what I'm saying here, but it seems like at every turn, there's been someone quick to point the finger and say, oh, that's fake. Oh, wait, no, there's letters that came. Well, she was in Oakland, I'm sure to say no. It almost seems too coincidental, Why is it there's always someone there to find out what the results are like that and leak to the press and then have what's reported back worded in such a way and with a headline that is almost misleading. In fact, at the end of the day, the earliest headlines were misleading. The second set of headlines were misleading because it fails to mention that the hate mail that was sent from Oakland was sent a whole month after she left. They only mention the fact, she was once in Oakland, and here we're getting letters from Oakland. They don't say when it, it's this concerted effort that I could see. It's obvious. It's transparent that there is a very strong sentiment somewhere by some people to attack her. And I think it's horrible that no one has fought back, and basically the public are in poles and pitchforks and fires a blazing mob mode, so no one feels like they're no one feels comfortable enough to actually the attacked work, guys. So where most people aren't going to have the gumption, especially her, no one's going to believe anything she says, so someone else has to speak up for her, and I fear that might as well be me. And we'll go into more details because there's more. So that's the deal. I'm glad that the city of Spokane is as transparent as it is, and I do give it very high marks for that. Really do. However, I can't ignore I'm a prisoner to the evidence that I have. I'm a prisoner to my own knowledge. So, let's talk about what the political situation appeared to have been. I don't know everything. I can't read people's minds. I haven't read every document on the internet, but I've gone into a lot of details about some things. And I guess I have to pick what it is I'm going to focus on, or things I'm going to say flat out are speculation, and some things are flat out speculation. To get back to that hate mail, at the end of the day, it is flat out speculation to assume that someone sent the hate mail for her, as her agent, under her direction, based on the evidence that I've seen. But there are some eyebrow-raising details to look into, and some thought needs to be put into it. And it would be good if she spoke up about, what those things were, if and when she feels comfortable enough to defend herself. And I think she ought to be defended, as anybody. And again, to reiterate this, I am not pro. I probably wouldn't be very happy to sit in a room and listen to her talk about and pass out the photographs or other materials and talk about things I myself don't have anything to do with, and I don't think even any of my ancestors had, even if they did, it's not me, about, clearly unjust things that have happened to minorities in this country that should never be forgotten. But there is this kind of feeling of being persecuted at times. I don't know. I've never heard her speak. I'm just saying. I wouldn't necessarily be. I'm not doing this because I have a secret reason, because I want that whatever message that she delivers to particularly get out. My reason is just that, quite simply, she's a human being and should be treated correctly in accord with, and history should record accurately what has happened with her. Just as much as I feel strongly about that enough to make videos about Bernard Otto Kuhn, who I have judged, at least, that there was a very good chance that he probably in fact was not a Nazi spy at all, even though even his name has been put into published books about how he's a Nazi spy and this and that and the other thing. I can tell you, based on the evidence I've seen, it's not conclusive at all. It was more or less allegation that graduated to fact with a trial that didn't work out that well. And guess what? In this country, there are people that get arrested and prosecuted for things they shouldn't be convicted for. It happens. Or accused publicly for things that they didn't do. And I'm completely against that. So, having said that, let's look at the basic political situation. So, Spokane apparently has a mayor and a city council of which there's a president. It's unclear to me exactly if just the mayor, just the city council, or both ended up picking the 5 individuals to be on the city council, not the city council, the office of the police ombudsman, in August of 2014. I don't, at least it's not yet important for me to figure that out just yet. But I'll get to it, or express who that was. We got a lot of papers, but not everything sticks to my head. Prior to the appointment of these individuals, and I believe the first meeting took place sometime around November of 2014. In April of 2014, the city attorney had some public meetings where she talked and she solicited input from the public about the selection or other issues related to issues related to the committee. Okay. Prior to 2014 and going back, which I know was as early as 2011. It may have even been earlier than 2011, but I'll just stick with 2011 because I have documents from 2011 going forward. Copies of complaints that, again, the city of Spokane is very good about being open with their documents. And I'm going to say one thing before I go on too much further. I should mention it might be a good idea for people to look at some of the redactions in 2014. I think that would be a good idea. That's all I'll say. Okay. If you know what they are, then you know what they do, and look at them, and maybe make some changes to the PDF documents is my suggestion, and reload those. Okay, so anyway, they're really good about getting documents out. Okay, so they're up, and they go back to at least 2011. Sometime in 2011, probably even the beginning of 2011. So a man named Tim Burns was the police ombudsman. He was in that office from 2011, and it appears by one of the news articles he resigned sometime in December 2014, and he stuck around, and I'm just going off vague memory, a couple months into 2015. Okay, that's what it seems like. He made himself available to consult after his resignation, and the last thing he said before he resigned was in public at that time, and this was in December, that he was retiring. Other newspaper reports seemed to imply that he was employed somewhere else and was getting better pay. Okay. I will mention this, that later on, with the removal of the 3 committee members, the report said that at least one of the reasons that he left, I don't remember if it was stated that it was the reason that they left, but I will say at least the people that prepared the independent report, independent as it was characterized, I'm not neutral, at least in my conclusions, okay, that he had left and his assistant had left their positions because of, quote, the conduct of the 3 members. Now, looking into this, it appears to me, it's really not clear from, I would like to be able to open up a MP4 file, because if you put a video up, I'll probably be able to download it, and I've made a collection of these. I would like to be able to open up a video recording of the proceedings from November of 2014 and see that she says, "Welcome to the first, Police Ombudsman Committee meeting." Either, if I had found that previously, I don't have it now, or I've never found it. Anyway, it's not really that important. other than to say that I want to, for my own purposes, I really want to know when the exact first meeting was. It appears by the agenda that that first meeting was held on November 2nd, 2014. A month into the process, in fact, month and a half. By December 17th, I remember the date of the newspaper article, or it's the spokesman article that's on the web, actually, because I myself don't have access to, I don't live in Spokane. I might know a few people there, or if I did, I wouldn't say who they were, but they're certainly not government officials, if I know anybody there. I know no government officials. I have no connection with the committee. I don't know Dolezal. I don't know Dominguez. I don't know any of those people. Never met them before. No one that's involved with this that I'm going to talk about do I know directly. Any police officer, none of that. I'm from California, lived here for quite some time. So it just seems a bit odd that a month and a half into the process, after 2 meetings, that now in June, when the report comes out, everybody's able to read it. It's stated now, and not 6 months earlier, that one of the reasons at least, why Mr. Burton, I think? Mr. Burns had left, not Springfield, but the Office of the Police Ombudsman Committee, and moved on to other things. That's very quick. It's also very clear to me that the committee had to operate for many months without the police ombudsman, and this caused some problems. During the meetings, there's video recordings of all these meetings. During the meetings, there'll be comments here and there by different members about having to work around the fact that there's no police ombudsman. And there was some controversy of what the committee was allowed to do given his absence. That was the subject of the report that I'm not going to be doing a video about today. But what I will do, actually, is I'm going to look in it to see what did the police ombudsman actually do, and if he really did leave because of for some reason connected with the fact that there was a committee, or those particular 3 people were on the committee. I really want to smith out what that actually is. I noticed that in the materials that were provided in the report that resulted in the 3 committee members' removal, or requests to be removed, I'm not sure what happened to Dominguez. Dolezal was voted off, and the other member resigned. Dominguez wanted some more time, and I haven't followed up on that. Who knows whether he would survive or not. I gathered from what I watched that there were 2, in general terms, political agendas that were going on, but that was surrounded by the absence of the ombudsman himself, which adds a little bit of confusion when you're looking at this from the outside. One side was saying that the members of the committee were overstepping. These were allegations that were raised by and expressed publicly by Councilman Richter, saying that he disagreed with 85% of the things that the committee had done, and he made this statement about about 2 weeks or so before the report came out. I haven't watched all the videos, but in the earlier ones, he doesn't seem to be as adamant about that. But whatever. um, I just have to wonder. Well, go figure whether anybody was informed about what the results of that report were going to be prior to its release, at least publicly. We don't know, but it sure does look fishy. It to my mind, it's quite more fishy. It's a lot fishier than just blanket allegations that a woman that appears black is going to get special favors and land on a committee that's said to be powerful. It was actually, for all practical purposes, castrated on the day that Mr. Burns resigned. So go figure what I think about that. What I do think about that is that even though the newspapers were characterizing her as a powerful woman, she wasn't. Her position at the NAACP was not paid. Half of, and this comes from the Coeur d'Alene Press itself, buried in the parts of the story no one will bother to read because there's more fascinating things to pay attention to at the top. But a good roughly half of the staff at the NAACP in Spokane are Caucasian. If you have that kind of pool to come from, there's probably a 50% chance, if you're doing things fairly, that you're going to pick a Caucasian woman as the head of the chapter. That's not a surprise. And it's especially not a surprise if she's employed as a professor at a university. Okay? And the fact that she wants to get involved in her community on a subject that has to do with police oversight, well, and the fact that Spokane only has 1.5% of its population that are African American, and that her appointment to the committee would constitute 20%. If anything, there was reason not to pick her, because it would be, if you're just picking her because she's black, then that would be a gross overrepresentation by 10 times. So what I'm going to say is, I don't think she was picked just because she was black. And the individual that was involved with the decision said that it was a consideration, but not the criteria. Okay, so she didn't get on that committee because she was black, or because she said she was black, or if she puts African American on the line, that means she'll be picked. Obviously, she had other qualifications to get on the committee. Councilmember Richter was picked to be on the committee, I would suspect, not because of anything else, but the fact that he had experience in the office of the police ombudsman. There could be other reasons, but it's out of bounds to say that those other reasons exist, even if you suspect that they exist. So the mail wasn't faked. I mean, you go through the whole thing. So, in my opinion, she was unnecessarily crucified. So now that we got that out of the way, now let's figure out what the motivation was. Okay? And so we're going to do this nice and slow. So first of all, we're going to look at what was the political situation up there in Spokane. Okay, so prior to 2014, close to the end of 2014, there was an individual that occupied the office of the police ombudsman. The Spokane police, of course, have been operating for quite a long time, and sometime before 2011, and in fact, the police ombudsman had taken his office at least before the first reports, the earliest reports that exist, such as that, in 2011. he, by basically by, the third, at least by the third, he could have been here long before this, but what I'm saying is he was here from 2011. I'm just establishing everything's in place in 2011. And being that, specifically, what is everything? Everything is, we have a police department with an internal affairs department, an individual that has been appointed as the police ombudsman. He works in the office of the police ombudsman. But no police ombudsman committee is in place yet, and that didn't happen for another 3 years. So now let's try to figure out, what did the police ombudsman do? Then we'll talk about what the committee was supposed to do, and we'll see if there's a conflict there that hasn't really been discussed, or if there's a difference of opinion as to how these parties should react, perhaps, and then see whether there was another reason why Dolezal was removed from the council, the committee, okay? So I'm just going over the first part here. What did the police ombudsman do? How different was he from the internal affairs? Let's look at it this way. So I'm going to guess that it's probably very likely that the Spokane Police Department had an internal affairs department that existed prior to the creation of the police ombudsman. Okay. Once the police ombudsman was created, the simple creation of the police ombudsman implies that someone somewhere with the power to make the judgment has decided, or a group or something. There's some idea in the city of Spokane prior to the creation of the police ombudsman that internal affairs is not enough. Right? But why would they create a police ombudsman if they already had an internal affairs guy? There's no reason to create a police ombudsman unless you have an internal affairs person. So there was some perception that just having internal affairs didn't solve whatever problem that either the public or the politicians or a combination thereof perceived was going on in this, the Spokane Police Department. And I'm going to go over this again, and I'm going to say that I don't think the Spokane Police Department is any different than just about any other police department in the United States. So what exactly is my point of view? There's a lot of police departments that don't have police ombudsmen, mind you. I will say this before I get into details. The real problem I think that happens is I think there's a vast disconnect between what the law says that police are allowed to do, the public believe police are allowed to do. And that'll become clear by examining, there's a cursory examination of only 25 of, I don't remember the exact number for 2014. I think that may have been the year where they had the most. No, sorry, 2011. So in 2011, there were, as far as I could tell, 68 reports that were released. Some of them have not been released. Some of them, there's just a summary saying we can't give you any details because of other legal considerations. I understand that. I mean, overall, the content is a lot of public disclosure, and that's always good, okay? So, for any government, for the citizenry, at least in as much as the citizenry is patient enough to look over the documents and make choice decisions for themselves. So I've grabbed just the result of the investigation, if there's a letter that exists, and additionally some information, one or two pages, that just the nature of the complaint, associated with 25 different complaints that were filed and or internal affairs investigations that were filed in 2011, when I'm pretty sure at least by the third investigation, which is numbered IA 1103, that Tim Burns was in place as the police ombudsman. So we can get an idea from here. If we just look at the stuff, we can figure out, what does this guy do, and how does it differ from internal affairs. What internal affairs does, as far as I could tell, in police departments, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm sure not an expert at internal affairs, but I could kind of tell by what's present in the documents, is that they are there to investigate complaints about the conduct of officers. It doesn't seem much different from a police ombudsman. Now, preliminarily, before I get into details, I'm going to state some of my conclusions, at least preliminarily. And that is to say that it appears fairly clear to me. And I've looked at not just the first 25 in 2011. I've looked at some in 2014. Some I've bothered to print out, some I've not. A couple of them I've bothered to print out the whole report and look over it with a fine-tooth comb. 2011, not so much. So that's kind of like the scope of detail that I have. But after looking at that much, I can tell there's consistently that most of the complaints are, at the end of the day, just pushed away. The response is a boilerplate letter that started to evolve back in 2011 that basically says that the actions were appropriate given the facts available to the individual, the officer, the employee, whatever. At least when citizenry has initiated the complaint. When the complaint has been made by their employees, for the most part, usually there's some kind of negative result to the person that's been complained about. I'm starting to get the idea, and not just from this circumstance, but in a general sense, in a wider sense, on a national level, that the government only seems to be effective at punishing other people, but they don't punish their own. Furthermore, it seems that the only thing the government really does is, in a broad general sense, is especially the police, is just hear complaints from people, then go out and if it's actually morally justifiable, put or not, put the individual that's been complained against through the mill, and there seems to be more of a desire to protect the institution that one finds themselves in, or to win if there's a, prosecutorial branch of the government that's involved, than to actually have as a primary concern fair treatment for people that turn out to not have done anything wrong. This seems to be a cardinal theme. It seems to me, and it's not just unique in Spokane, I think it's everywhere, there's a certain attitude that is very clear if you just watch, that police officers place a higher importance on what they perceive as important in executing their duties, and they put that at a higher place than they do people's rights. That's what it's become. This is the way I perceive it. The government in general, and I'm not just talking about Spokane, I'm talking about, has turned into a weapon that seems to go around damaging things, but they don't really seem to build a lot. We take, for example, to make my point on that issue, and you can watch this if you want. There's a young man that is an ex-Air Force soldier that was doing what he was allowed to do. His name was Mark Worley. And I will say this again, I by no means am a pro-gun person. I have no desire to own guns, and probably never will. That having said that, my bringing this issue up that is supported heavily by people that are pro-guns, those are the people that have emerged mostly to defend this individual. I will say that to me, the gun issue is not important. What's important is the fact that this young man was arrested even though he obeyed the law, went to trial, and was found guilty when the criteria, as far as I can tell, doesn't even fit. And too bad for him. He just gets, he gets arrested. And basically, it looks very clear to me that the individuals that were involved with this incident over in Vancouver didn't give a hoot about his rights. There were people that had complained, and the government's job is to go out there and wield its power. And certainly the people that were in a position to deal with the fact that he had obeyed the gun laws, and Washington law, as far as I know, you're allowed to walk around with a big ass assault rifle, strapped around your shoulder. But basically, and then it's all on tape here. Of course, he wasn't able to upload what had actually happened until after the DA pursued his conviction. And it's so sad you can only laugh because it's just ridiculous. So anyway, he's got his website is On the Move Show, and here's a little bit of it.
Welcome to On the Move.
I'm in Vancouver. I'm not sure what the laws are in regards to loitering or aimless walking or anything, so right now, down to sign on the window.
So he's basically walking. Okay. So this guy's basically walking around with a big ass rifle, semi-automatic rifle. Goes in, gets some food, and he's going back to walk back to his car.
Okay. All right.
People ask him questions.
This is my second number right. Just showing people that they can, and just getting everybody aware.
And it's not merely a Second Amendment right. It actually is. There is a, according to him, and he certainly wasn't convicted in violation of weaponry. What they convicted him on was the fact he was walking around with a gun over his shoulder. The law that was related to the fact that people were scared because he was walking around with a gun over his shoulder was the law that they convicted him on. And when the jury considered the standard for, as he explained, as the people that were scared and reported him shouldn't have been. In other words, it's not just the fact that they were scared. It was more of the fact that they took his legal carrying of this gun and the way it's prescribed to be carried as somehow a threat message that he had sent them telepathically, you know. Anyway, so it gets over here.
Put the rifle on the ground. Put the rifle on the ground. I'd rather not touch it, officer. Put the rifle.
Now, the reason why he says that is he's military trained, and I gather from what he said is that when people have guns pointing at you, and at this time there were, the last thing you ever want to do is put your own hands on a gun when people are pointing guns at you, because they might think that you're going to fire the gun.
I have 2 weapons pointed at me right now. I know it's...
Now what's going on here is basically saying, well, am I being detained? Tell me what law I violated. If I'm not being detained, am I free to go? He does this whole thing, and finally this officer pretty much, even though he doesn't consent to any searches or seizures, of his, they can't even detain him if it comes by Supreme Court. They can't detain him unless they have reason to believe he's broken a law. But what that means is his gun would be unregistered. He would be carrying it in the wrong fashion. There's some way you have to carry it, which I don't completely understand. Or whether he brandished it, pointed it at people, things of that nature. He had, ergo he had committed a crime. Then they're allowed to detain him. That's what supposedly the constitutional law, as defined, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, establishes. And until they even have a reason to believe he's broken the law and can state what law they believe he's broken, supposedly they're not supposed to be able to get his identification. Look at her. Or even detain him longer than it would take for them to determine whether a crime has occurred.
And no crimes have been committed at this point that we know of.
Yeah.
What crime have I committed?
No crimes have been committed at this point that we know of.
Are you...
Your gun stolen, I don't know.
Are you aware that I have to be committing a crime, or you have to have a reasonable suspicion that I committed a crime? It'd be great if you would just let me go. I didn't realize that I was in Nazi Germany.
Okay.
Alright.
So any reason why you're walking around with an AR?
I'm not answering any more of your guys' questions. You haven't done anything to anger me or anything, but...
Oh, I understand. I understand that there's a Second Amendment, there's a Constitution, and you're perfectly...
Mr. Smith, as long as you understand that based on your behavior and your actions, you have caused alarm and disorder in the community, okay? We have checked, you have refused to identify yourself, that is fine. However, based on your future behavior from this point on, you may receive different contact, okay? Meaning that you may be detained and identified because you are causing additional alarm and disorder. You understand what I'm saying, sir?
I understand. You just said you're going to violate my Fourth Amendment right.
So you know, okay?
So, here's...
Have a nice day. You may pick up your firearm.
Which you've strewn my bullet all over the ground.
And you may leave, sir.
I really appreciate your service to this community, officer.
You're very welcome, sir.
And I appreciate you guys defending the oath you took to uphold the Constitution.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
yourself a great day.
You wonderful people.
Alright, so he gets his stuff back together, and then he starts walking.
City of Vancouver. Not very good for him.
His car is basically in the general direction he was heading already, which eventually we'll get to.
That's not safe. the way, he did not give me his spelling of his name.
No, they didn't tell him that, oh, don't walk here. Or at that point, they just said you're free to go.
Number 1292. Hernandez. All right.
Now, here's something very interesting. The claim was made on the news that when he was asked to leave the property, that he refused. No, he's leaving right now. Here it is on camera. Now he's just heading back towards his car, which is down this sidewalk, and the police officer's up there. And you can't really tell. He was not asked to walk the other way. He was asked to leave the property. So he turns around.
Wow.
Even though his car's behind him.
Incredible. Officer! Officer! I need to get to my car is over there. Officer, I'm trying to get to my car. It's over there. I want to leave.
Sir, keep your hands where I can see them at this point, please. I'm going to ask you to set the phone down so that you don't damage your own phone. Set it on the ground. Do not reach
My car's
near
over there.
your firearm. Set the phone on the ground.
I just want to leave. My car is right there.
Hands on top of your head. Put them on your head. Don't move.
Why am I being assaulted?
Okay, so he gets arrested. And typically the sidewalk is not considered private property. If that secretly was the circumstance, well, there's certainly no notice that the sidewalk is private. He has no way to know. Best you could tell is he was complying. So, okay. So that I just want to make sure that I made that point. There are people that he gets charged by the Vancouver District Attorney was interested in winning the case rather than looking at what had happened on the merits. It's unclear when they actually got a copy of that video. He seems to think that he was able to figure out that they made a copy of the video from his phone on much earlier than before the trial had taken place, but they still said that somehow he had locked them out of the phone. And basically, in the process of his just trying to make sure that, they wanted the password to his phone, he wasn't going to just give out the password to his phone. Basic protection of his rights from being searched. It doesn't mean he had anything super fancy on his phone that he needed the police not to know about. It means that he wanted to just protect his rights under, and so they proceeded into the court and they prosecuted him based upon everything that happened prior to his encounter with the police. He tried to appeal, and the appeal was rejected because the issue at law had already been answered in the higher courts. And that is, he should have been okay. So he has to live now with the fact that these people decided to arrest him. Well, the moral of the story is don't do something stupid. Well, if the law says it's okay to do something, then do it. The police should not override the law and effectively end up being in effective collusion with the district attorney's office that wants to prosecute and win the case more than they want to make sure that the law is upheld. Don't know if there is an internal affairs department in Vancouver. Probably is. Don't know if there's an ombudsman, but even if there is an ombudsman, by looking at from what I've seen with the reports, it just doesn't really seem to matter what happens with the police for the most part, unless it's a very minor violation. The cop cussed, or some guy with the medical dog was denied his right to visit a parade. Usually these reports end up being in one of three ways. Either, and we'll go over these. The first way is we see nothing wrong with the policeman's actions. The second way is we don't have enough evidence to determine whether the police had acted improperly. Or the third way is the person that complained is no longer talking to us, so therefore we're going to suspend this case. After a while, people begin to realize, especially after this, and this is not a unique circumstance, and after things like this happen to people, they soon realize they're just wasting their time complaining at all. And the result of having this outside person that was supposed to represent the public, all I could say is this, is that the complaints as they came in the complainants aren't sophisticated enough to pick the right little nuance of what the police did, the little sliver of improper action, if there was any improper action. See, the police are authorized to do things that people don't think they're authorized to do. And even if they do things that they are not authorized to do, a lot of the time, some other party will miss the fact that they didn't act properly, or the person complaining will find themselves intimidated and disappear, or it'll just be a pure the police officer's word against the complainant, and the tie always goes to the police officer in every case. So I'll show that happens. So basically what I'm saying here is that the presence of the police ombudsman made no difference at all, in my judgment, as to the outcome of investigations of wrongdoing in the Spokane Police Department. Notice, and I'll be very clear on this actually, I'm not saying that at this point, I'm not saying that the Spokane Police Department is doing a lot of things improperly and it's being covered up by Internal Affairs and Tim Burns. I'm not saying that. Okay, let's get that clear. What I am saying is that there's a gap between the perception of what the public believes the police should be able to do and what the police know that they're authorized to do. That is the majority of the cases that happen. There are some cases where the police are doing things that it seems as though, from the limited knowledge that I have, and I'm no legal scholar by any means. In fact, obviously, the individuals that are involved with these cases have more exposure to police work, but that's why I'm going to look at these just in general, and in one case and specifically, just so we can judge for ourselves as to what's going on. But I'm going to tell you right now that what I believe the real conclusion is that there are some circumstances that policemen are put into, or other repercussions that police have to come across, that puts them in a very tight spot. And in this case, where, as a citizen, this individual who has the constitutional right to bear arms, he has the constitutional right to not consent to any search and seizures unless he's been informed of what crime they believe he has committed. And so he doesn't show them their ID, doesn't give them his name, all that stuff. That from his point of view, he's just following the law, and he gets arrested. This is true. So this is a breakdown of the system. The system is breaking down from his point of view. From the police's point of view, they go, wow, we got this guy walking around with this big rifle and not telling us why he's got it, what he's carrying it around for, what he's doing with it. What were to happen if people had called saying there's a guy walking around with a rifle strapped across his chest, fully visible to everybody, and we go out and we respond, and we let this guy go, and then he walks into some business establishment and shoots, goes on some killing spree. The police department also had that to worry about, and they also had to worry about whether They don't know who he is. They've never met him. They don't know what his character is. They don't know if he could turn mentally unstable. He can end up... They just don't know. It doesn't mean that he would. In fact, this individual, I think his name is David Worley. Actually, is it Worley? Let's look, make sure exactly what this was. No, his name is Mac. Mac Worley. So I'm going to close this. So Mac Worley has had his rights violated. That is, as I could judge, his rights have been violated, and a jury has convicted him on a charge he should not have been convicted for, and the district attorney didn't provide any discretion to not prevent that from happening. Inasmuch that their duty, the reason why they prosecute, is so that they will uphold the laws of the state. Without a prosecutor, no one gets punished for violating crimes, right? But in this case, and it's not the only time that this happened, an individual was charged with the crime, and in my judgment, incorrectly. Now the jury didn't think so, but they're not legal scholars, and I'll say jury instructions as he read them are so rephrased into plain language that you lose all the distinction of the various nuances of law. It could amount to a misinterpretation of the law just by jury instructions. And that's what happened in this case. What happened was that there was a concept of basically the public should have known that he was allowed to carry the gun around. The population also should have known that he was not allowed to take the gun off his shoulder for where it was strapped and point it around at people. Okay, this is the way I take it. Details I could be wrong on, but basically this is what I think had happened. And they interpreted the jury instructions for that to mean so therefore, the real intimidating act as intended in the Washington law was if he pointed the gun at somebody, and therefore it was indeed intimidating people with his gun. Okay, but the jury had interpreted the fact that he just had a gun, which was allowed by the law, was intimidating to them, therefore he was guilty. Well, if that's the case, it invalidates the non-concealed weapon carrying in Washington State completely, because there's going to be someone everywhere you go. If you have an unconcealed gun and you're anywhere, anybody sees you, if they decide that scares them, so it doesn't make any sense for it to be any other thing than taking into consideration whether it's legal to have the gun on your shoulder in the first place, and the way the gun is used, if it results in intimidation, not just a mere fact that, this guy's got a gun, he scares me, because that's not the measure. And if Washington State doesn't want people to be able to carry unconcealed weaponry, their guns, around their shoulder in a shoulder strap, they ought to change the law and not instead tell people that the law is one thing, but when they actually try to follow the law, that they're going to be arrested and prosecuted. Instead, to see if a jury could misunderstand the law enough to get a conviction. Just change the law. You know, that's the way I see it. So I'm going to stop this part here, and I'm going to do a second part where I go into details on some of the reports that were issued. And again, what I'm saying here is that there's a disconnect, because the police we're going to be thinking about all these different things. You know, there's a guy walking around with a gun in our town. What if he flips his lid and decides to go shoot some people? You know, that wouldn't be very good. We could have stopped him. From his standpoint, is he has constitutional rights and they should have been preserved. So when you get situations where people are put in impossible circumstances, things like this happen. And what I'm saying is there's numerous impossible situations that take place all over this country, and it's chronic. And what ends up, the result of that ends up being, is that citizens, and there's some, I'm sorry to say it, but there are some police officers that have this ego about them, that they aren't happy unless, no matter if the individual has the right to not comply with what they ask, that if they don't, that just pisses them off, and they're just going to do what they want to anyway. Basically, they're people that like to be, some of them are people that like to be in power and exercise that power and be able to tell people that they have to stop and have to show them their wallets and give them a lecture and all this stuff. There's some people that are like that. And there's some examples that I'll show. Actually, how much more time have I got here? I got a little more. Not much. This one here is kind of classic, so let's do this. Now, the basic idea here, or the basic story, is that where is it? I'm going to stop now because I'm going to run out of space soon.